Hello everyone, this is part 2 of What If Naruto Uchiha joins the Olympians, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
The rest of the journey back was silent, but they ditched Grover as soon as they got to the bus terminal, because the rest of bus ride they listened to Grover. He was freaking out Percy and was looking both of them like they was a dead man, while muttering, "Why does this always happen? And, why does it always have to be 6th grade?" Whenever he got upset, Grover's bladder acted up, so they weren't surprised when, as soon as they got off the bus, Grover went to the bathroom at the bus station. Instead of waiting him, Percy got his suitcase, slipped outside with Naruto, and caught the first taxi uptown. East 104th and 1st, Percy told the driver. "You know Grover will not like this," Naruto said. "I know, but we have to go. I have to get home and see my mom and Grover is freaking me out," Percy said. "Whatever," Naruto said as they traveled to Percy's mom's apartment. Along the way, Percy told Naruto all about his mom. "Her name is Sally Jackson and she's the best person in the world. That also proves my theory that the best people have the rottenest luck," he said, and Naruto nodded, having heard that from him a few weeks ago. 0 with Grover 0. Grover got out of the bathroom and looked around for Percy and Naruto. He only saw Naruto with his arms crossed. "Naruto, where is Percy?" "He went home," Naruto replied, making Grover's eyes widen. What? Grover freaked. "Grover, Mr. Brunner was right. I am not normal," Naruto said. "You don't have to protect me, because I am perfectly capable to protect myself." With that he disappeared in a flock of crow. Grover had a look of pure shock on his face. 0 Percy's mom apartment 0. Naruto and Percy walked Percy's mom's little apartment. Percy was hoping his mom would be home from work. Instead, smelly Gabe was in the living room, playing poker with his buddies. The television blared ESPN. Chips and beer cans were strewn all over the carpet. Hardly looking up, Gabe said around his cigar, "So, you are home and who is your loser friend?" "Naruto," Percy said. "Where's my mom?" "Working," Gabe said. "You got any cash?" That made Percy rolled his eyes. "No, welcome back. Good to see you. How has your life been the last 6 months?" he thought. Percy noticed that Gabe had put on weight. He looked like a tuskless walrus in thrift store clothes. He had about 3 hairs on his head, all combed over his bald scalp, as if that made him handsome or something. This guy managed the electronics megamart in Queens, but he stayed home most of the time. It was a wonder why he hadn't been fired long before. He just kept on collecting paychecks, spending the money on cigars that made Percy nauseous, and on beer, of course. Always beer. Whenever Percy was home, he expected him to give his gambling funds. He called that the guy secret. Meaning, if he told his mom, he would punch his lights out. "I don't have any cash," Percy told him. Gabe raised a greasy eyebrow. "You took a taxi from the bus station," he said. "Probably paid with a 20, got 6, $7 in change. If somebody expects to live under this roof, he ought to carry his own weight. Am I right, Eddie?" Eddie, the super of the apartment building, looked at Percy with a twinge of sympathy. "Come on, Gabe," he said. "The kid just got here. Am I right?" Gabe repeated. Eddie scowled into his bowl of pretzels. The other 2 guys passed gas in harmony. "Fine," Percy said. He dug a wad of dollars out of his pocket and threw the money on the table. "I hope you lose. Your report card came, brain boy," Gabe shouted after me. "I wouldn't act so snooty." Naruto saw the scene. He looked at Gabe and said calmly, "Give Percy back his money." Then just like a puppet Gabe had obeyed his order. He gave Percy back his money. "Now sleep," he said to Gabe and Eddie. He put both of them to sleep. Percy looked at the money, which Gabe had given back him. "How did you do that?" he asked to Naruto in surprised tone. "Hypnosis and illusion," Naruto said. "I wish I could do that," Percy said. They left the room and went Percy's room, which really wasn't his room. During school months, it was Gabe's study. He didn't study anything in there except old car magazines, but he loved shoving Percy's stuff in the closet, leaving his muddy boots on my windowsill, and doing his best to make the place smell like his nasty cologne and cigars and stale beer. Percy dropped his suitcase on the bed. Home sweet home. Percy thought about Gabe's smell, which was almost worse than the nightmares about Mrs. Dodds, or the sound of that old fruit lady's shears snipping the yarn. But as soon as he thought that, his legs felt weak. He remembered Grover's look of panic, how he'd made me promise they wouldn't go home without him. A sudden chill rolled through him. Naruto saw fear on Percy's face and asked, "Are you okay, Percy?" Before Percy could answer, he heard his mom, Sally's voice. "Percy." She opened the bedroom door, and his fears melted. Percy looked at his mother. Her eyes sparkle and change color in the light. Her smile is as warm as a quilt. She's got a few gray streaks mixed in with her long brown hair. "Oh, Percy," she hugged him tight. "I can't believe it. You've grown since Christmas." "Thanks, Mom," Percy said. Her red, white, and blue Sweet on America uniform smelled like the best things in the world: chocolate, licorice, and all the other stuff she sold at the candy shop in Grand Central. She'd brought him a huge bag of free samples, the way she always did when he came home. Sally saw Naruto and asked, "So who is your friend?" "Oh, that is Naruto Uchiha. He is a good friend from school." Percy replied. "Good to know you have a friend." Sally Jackson said, "Did you know what happened with Gabe and his friend, and why they are sleeping like this?" "I don't know," Percy lied. Sally nodded and hugged him again. Percy then began to tell her all about his school year at Yancy Academy. It seriously was not as bad as the headmaster said it was. He didn't really tell her much about the museum because it still freaked him out. "Did something scare you?" "No, Mom," Percy said. He wanted to tell her about Mrs. Dodds and the three old ladies with the yarn, but he thought it would sound stupid. Sally pursed her lips. She knew Percy was hiding something, but she didn't push him. "I have a surprise for you," she said. "We're going to the beach." Percy's eyes widened. "Montauk. 3 nights, same cabin." "When?" Sally smiled. "As soon as I get changed." She looked at Naruto. "You can also come with us, Naruto." "Sorry, I couldn't come with you," Naruto said. "Why?" Percy asked. Naruto said, "I have to go somewhere, Percy. I only came here to meet your mother, maybe next time." "No problem, Naruto," Sally said. "Goodbye, Percy and Mrs. Jackson," Naruto said. "Goodbye, Naruto," Percy said. He was a bit sad, because Naruto wasn't coming with him. Naruto left the room and walked out to the Percy's home. He looked around and when he saw there was no one, he disappeared in the swirling of the vortex. Zero narrator's apartment 0. Naruto appeared in his apartment. "Karasu-chan," Naruto said. He called his raven. Karasu came out from the shadow and landed on his left shoulder. "Yes, master," she said. "Tomorrow we are going to somewhere." "Where?" "A summer camp." 0 with Percy 0. Gabe kept griping and groaning about losing Sally's cooking, and most important, his 78 camera, for the whole weekend. "Not a scratch on this car, brain boy," he warned Percy. "Not one little scratch. It's not me who'll drive the car. I am only 12, Percy thought. But that didn't matter to Gabe. If a seagull so much as popped on his paint job, he'd find a way to blame him. Watching him lumber back toward the apartment building, Percy got so mad he did something. As Gabe reached the doorway, he made the hand gesture like Grover make on the bus, a sort of warding off evil gesture, a clawed hand over his heart, then a shoving movement toward Gabe. The screen door slammed shut so hard it whacked Gabe in the butt and sent him flying up the staircase as if he'd been shot from a cannon. Percy didn't stay long enough to find out what happened. He got in the Camaro and told his mom to step on it. 0 time skip 0. Right now the car was pulling in next to a wooden cabin that located right on the beach. It was a little pastel box with faded curtains, half sunken into the dunes. There was sand in the sheets and spiders in the cabinets, and the sea was too cold to swim in. "I love the place," Percy thought. They got there, opened all the cabin's windows, and went through the usual cleaning routine. We walked on the beach, fed blue corn chips to the seagulls, and munched on blue jelly beans, blue saltwater taffy, and all the other free samples Sally had brought from work. When it got dark, they made a fire. They roasted hot dogs and marshmallows. Sally told Percy stories about when she was a kid, back before her parents died in the plane crash. She told him about the books she wanted to write someday, when she had enough money to quit the candy shop. "Mom, what was my father like?" Percy asked with some courage. "He was kind," Percy, Sally said. Tall, handsome, and powerful. But gentle, too. You have his black hair, you know, and his green eyes. She fished a blue jelly bean out of her candy bag. I wish he could see you, Percy. He would be so proud. How old was I? Percy asked. I mean, when he left. Sally watched the flames. He was only with me for one summer, Percy. Right here on this beach. This cabin. But, he knew me as a baby. No honey, he knew I was expecting a baby, but he never saw you. He had to leave before you were born. Percy nodded, obviously feeling a little hurt that his father never really met him. Also, he was angry at his father, for going on that ocean voyage, for not having the guts to marry his mom. He'd left them, and now they stuck with smelly Gabe. Are you going to send me away again? Percy asked. To another boarding school. Sally pulled a marshmallow from the fire. I don't know, honey. Her voice was heavy. I think we will have to do something. Because you don't want me around. Percy regretted the words as soon as they were out. His mom's eyes welled with tears. She took his hand, squeezed it tight. Oh, Percy, no. I have to, honey, for your own good. I have to send you away. Her words reminded him of what Mr. Brunner had said, that it was best for him to leave Yancey. Because I'm not normal, Percy said. You say that as if it's a bad thing, Percy. But you don't realize how important you are. I thought Yancey Academy would be far enough away. I thought you'd finally be safe. Safe from what? She met his eyes, and a flood of memories came back to him, all the weird, scary things that had ever happened to him, some of which he tried to forget. I've tried to keep you as close to me as I could, Sally said. They told me that was a mistake. But there's only one other option, Percy, the place your father wanted to send you. And I just can't stand to do it. My father wanted me to go to a special school. Not a school, Sally said softly. A summer camp. Why would my dad, who hadn't even stayed around long enough to see me born, talk to my mom about a summer camp? And if it was so important, why hadn't she ever mentioned it before? Percy thought. I'm sorry, Percy, Sally said, seeing the look in my eyes. But I can't talk about it. I couldn't send you to that place. It might mean saying goodbye to you for good. For good, but if it's only a summer camp. Sally turned toward the fire, and Percy knew from her expression that if he asked her any more questions she would start to cry. 0 with Naruto 0. Naruto was packing his bag. Why we are going a summer camp? Karasu asked. To find my aunt's question, Naruto said. Do you know how we can go there? Mr. Brunner is already there. We can follow his energy signature, Naruto said. Now time to take a nap. 0 in Dream 0. That night both Percy and Naruto had a vivid dream. It was storming on the beach, and 3 beautiful animals, a white horse, a golden eagle, and the pitch-black raven was trying to kill each other at the edge of the surf. Well, the raven was not doing much. It just hovered in midair, watching the two fights and only with a mild look of interest. Of course it would attack at certain times. The eagle swooped down and slashed the horse's muzzle with its huge talons. The horse reared up and kicked at the eagle's wings. The raven then decided to claw at the eagle a bit before doing the same to the horse. As they fought, the ground rumbled, and a monstrous voice chuckled somewhere beneath the earth, goading the animals to fight harder. Naruto saw Percy ran toward them, to stop them from killing each other, but he was running in slow motion. He saw the eagle dive down, its beak for the horse's wide eyes, while the raven decides to help out its flying companion and Percy screamed, "No!" Naruto waked up from a dream. Wearied dream, he thought. What happened? Karasu asked. Just dream, but it was felt real. 0 with Percy 0. Percy woke up. Outside, it really was storming, the kind of storm that cracks trees and blows down houses. There was no horse or eagle on the beach, just lightning making false daylight, and 20-foot waves pounding the dunes like artillery. With the next thunderclap, his mom woke. She sat up, eyes wide, and said, "Hurricane." Percy knew that was crazy. Long Island never sees hurricanes this early in the summer. But the ocean seemed to have forgotten. Over the roar of the wind, he heard a distant bellow, an angry, tortured sound that made his hair stand on end. Then a much closer noise, like mallets in the sand. A desperate voice, someone yelling, pounding on the cabin door. Sally sprang out of bed in her nightgown and threw open the lock. Grover stood framed in the doorway against a backdrop of pouring rain. But he wasn't. He wasn't exactly same Grover, he knows. Searching all night, Grover said to Percy. What were you thinking? Sally looked at Percy in terror, not scared of Grover, but of why he'd come. Percy, she shouted. What happened at school? What didn't you tell me? Percy was frozen, looking at Grover. He couldn't understand what he was seeing. O Ziukai Orloi Theoi. Grover yelled. It's right behind me. Didn't you tell her? Percy was too shocked to register that Grover just cursed in ancient Greek, and he did understand him perfectly. He was too shocked to wonder how Grover had gotten here by himself in the middle of the night. Because Grover didn't have his pants on, and where his legs should be. Sally looked at him sternly and talked in a tone she'd never used before. Percy, tell me now. Percy stammered something about the old ladies at the fruit stand, and Mrs. Dodds, and his mom stared at him, her face deathly pale in the flashes of lightning. She grabbed her purse, tossed Percy, his rain jacket, and said, get in the car. Both of you. Go. Grover ran for the Camaro, but he wasn't running, exactly. He was trotting, shaking his shaggy hindquarters, and suddenly his story about a muscular disorder in his legs made sense to Percy. He understood how he could run so fast and still limp when he walked. Because where his feet should be, there were no feet. There were cloven hooves. They didn't notice a raven, who was watching the whole scene, disappeared with a puff of smoke. They tore through the night along dark country roads. The wind slammed against the Camaro. Rain lashed the windshield. Percy didn't know how his mom could see anything, but she kept her foot on the gas. Every time there was a flash of lightning, Percy looked at Grover sitting next to him in the back seat and he wondered if he did go insane, or if he was wearing a shag carpet pants. So, Grover, you and my mom know each other? Percy asked to finally find his voice. Grover's eyes flitted to the rear-view mirror, though there were no cars behind us. Not exactly, he said. I mean, we've never met in person. But she knew I was watching you. Watching me. Keeping tabs on you and Naruto, making sure you two were okay. So, where is Naruto? I thought he was with you, he said. He didn't come with us. He had something to do. Grover, what are you, exactly? That doesn't matter right now. It doesn't matter. From the waist down, my best friend is a donkey. Grover let out a sharp, throaty, blah ha ha. Percy had heard him make that sound before, but he did always assume it was a nervous laugh. Now he realized it was more of an irritated bleat. Goat. Grover cried. What? I'm goat from the waist down. You just said it didn't matter. Blah ha ha. There are satyrs who would trample you underhoof for such an insult. Whoa, wait, satyrs. You mean like Mr. Brunner's myths? Were those old ladies at the fruit stand a myth, Percy? Was Mrs. Dodds a myth? So you admit there was a Mrs. Dodds? Of course. Then why? The less you knew, the fewer monsters you'd attract, Grover said. We put mist over the human's eyes. We hoped you'd think the kindly one was a hallucination. But it was no good. You started to realize who you are. Who I? Wait a minute, what do you mean? The weird bellowing noise rose up again somewhere behind us, closer than before. Whatever was chasing us was still on our trail. Percy, Sally said, there's too much to explain and not enough time. We have to get you to safety. Safety from what? Who's after me? Oh. Nobody much, Grover said, obviously still miffed about the donkey comment. Just the Lord of the Dead and a few of his bloodthirsty minions. Grover. Sorry, Mrs. Jackson. Could you drive faster, please? Percy tried to wrap his head around all this madness. His mom made a hard left. They swerved onto a narrower road, racing past darkened farmhouses and wooded hills and pick your own strawberries signs on white picket fences. Where are we going? Percy asked. The summer camp one told you about, Sally said. Her voice was tight. She was trying for Percy's sake not to be scared. The place your father wanted to send you. The place you didn't want me to go. Please, dear, Sally said. This is hard enough. Try to understand. You're in danger. Because some old ladies cut yarn. Those weren't old ladies, Grover said. Those were the fates. Do you know what it means? The fact they appeared in front of you. They only do that when you're about to. When someone's about to die. Whoa. You said, you. No, I didn't. I said, someone. You meant, you. As in me. I meant you, like, someone. Not you, you. Boys. Sally said. She pulled the wheel hard to the right, and Percy got a glimpse of a figure she'd swerved to avoid, a dark fluttering shape now lost behind them in the storm. What was that? Percy asked. We're almost there, Sally said, ignoring his question. Another mile, please, please, please. Outside, nothing but rain and darkness. Percy thought about Mrs. Dodds and the moment when she changed into the thing with pointed teeth and leathery wings. His limbs went numb from delayed shock. She really hadn't been human. She'd meant to kill him. Then he thought about Mr. Brunner. And the sword he had thrown him. Before he could ask Grover about that, there was a blinding flash, a jaw-rattling boom. And the car explodes, and land on the ground upside down. Percy peeled his forehead off the back of the driver's seat and said, "Ow." Percy. Sally shouted. "I'm okay." Percy tried to shake off the daze. He wasn't dead. The car hadn't really exploded. They did swerve into a ditch. The driver's side doors wedged in the mud. The roof had cracked open like an eggshell and rain was pouring in. Lightning. That was the only explanation. They blasted right off the road. Next to him in the back seat was a big motionless lump. Grover. Grover slumped over, blood trickling from the side of his mouth. Percy shook his furry hip. "No. Even if you are a half barnyard animal, you're my best friend and I don't want you to die," Percy thought. Grover groaned. "Food. He is all right." "Percy," Sally said. "We have to." Her voice faltered. In a flash of lightning, through the mud-spattered rear windshield, Percy saw a figure lumbering toward us on the shoulder of the road. The sight of it made his skin crawl. It was a dark silhouette of a huge guy, like a football player. He seemed to be holding a blanket over his head. His top half was bulky and fuzzy. His appraised hands made it look like he had horns. "Who is Percy?" Sally said, deadly serious. "Get out of the car." She tried the driver's side but all the mud was blocking their way out. "Climb out the passenger's side," she said to Percy. "Percy, you have to run. Do you see that big tree?" What? Another flash of lightning and through the smoking hole in the roof Percy saw the tree she meant. A huge, White House Christmas tree-sized pine at the crest of the nearest hill. "That's the property line," Sally said. "Get over that hill and you'll see a big farmhouse down in the valley. Run and don't look back. Yell for help. Don't stop until you reach the door. Mom, you're coming too." Her face was pale, her eyes as sad as when she looked at the ocean. "No," Percy shouted. "You are coming with me. Help me carry Grover." "Food," Grover moaned, a little louder. Percy saw, the man with the blanket on his head kept coming toward them, making his grunting, snorting noises. As he got closer, Percy realized he wasn't holding a blanket over his head, because there was no blanket. It was his head and the points were his horns. "He doesn't want us," Sally said. "He wants you. Besides, I can't cross the property line." "But we don't have time, Percy. Go, please." He climbed across Grover and pushed the door open into the rain. "We're going together. Come on, Mom. I told you. Mom, I am not leaving you. Help me with Grover." Percy didn't wait for her answer. He scrambled outside, dragging Grover from the car. He was surprisingly light, but Percy couldn't have carried him very far if his mother hadn't come to his aid. Together, they draped Grover's arms over their shoulders and started stumbling uphill through the wet waist-high grass. Glancing back, Percy got my first clear look at the monster. He was 7 feet tall, easy, his arms and legs like something from the cover of Muscle Man magazine, bulging biceps and triceps and a bunch of other caps, all stuffed like baseballs under vein webbed skin. He wore no clothes except underwear, bright white fruit of the looms, which would have looked funny, except that the top half of his body was so scary. Coarse brown hair started at about his belly button and got thicker as it reached his shoulders. His neck was a mass of muscle and fur leading up to his enormous head, which had a snout as long as his arm, snotty nostrils with a gleaming brass ring, cruel black eyes, and horns, enormous black and white horns. Percy recognized the monster, all right. He had been in one of the first stories Mr. Brunner told them. He blinked the rain out of his eyes. "That's Pasiphae's son," Sally said. "I wish I'd known how badly they want to kill you. But he's the Min. Don't say his name," she warned. "Names have power." The pine tree was still way too far, 100 yards uphill at least. Percy glanced behind him again. The Minotaur hunched over the car, looking in the windows, or not looking, exactly. More like snuffling, nuzzling. Percy wasn't sure why he bothered, since he was only about 50 feet away. "Food," Grover moaned. Shush, Percy told him. Mom, what's he doing? Doesn't he see us? His sight and hearing are terrible, Sally said. He goes by smell, but he'll figure out where we are soon enough. As if on cue, the Minotaur bellowed in rage. He picked up Gabe's Camaro by the torn roof, the chassis creaking and groaning. He raised the car over his head and threw it down the road. It slammed into the wet asphalt and skidded in a shower of sparks for about half a mile before coming to a stop. The gas tank exploded. Not a scratch, Percy remembered Gabe saying. Percy, Sally said, when he sees us, he'll charge. Wait until the last second, then jump out of the way, directly sideways. He can't change directions very well once he's charging. Do you understand? How do you know all this? I've been worried about an attack for a long time. I should have expected this. I was selfish, keeping you near me. Keeping me near you. But, another bellow of rage, and the bullman started tramping uphill. He'd smelled us. The pine tree was only a few more yards, but the hill was getting steeper and slicker. Looking behind them, they saw the bullman was picking up pace and getting closer and closer to them. Sally exhausted, but she shouldered Grover. Go, Percy. Separate. Remember what I said. Percy sprinted to the left, turned, and saw the creature bearing down on him. His black eyes glowed with hate. He reeked like rotten meat. He lowered his head and charged, those razor-sharp horns aimed straight at his chest. Percy thought, I could never outrun this thing. He held his ground, and at the last moment, he jumped to the side. The Minotaur stormed past like a freight train, then bellowed with frustration and turned, but not toward Percy this time, to his mother, Sally, who was setting Grover down in the grass. They reached the crest of the hill. Down the other side Percy saw a valley, just as his mother had said, and the lights of a farmhouse glowing yellow through the rain. But that was half a mile away. We'd never make it, Percy thought. The Minotaur grunted, pawing the ground. He kept eyeing Sally, who was now retreating slowly downhill, back toward the road, trying to lead him away from Grover. Run, Percy, she shouted. I can't go any farther. Run. The Minotaur charged her. She tried to sidestep, as she told Percy to do, but then he had learned his lesson. His hand shot out and grabbed her by the neck as she tried to get away. He lifted her as she struggled, kicking and pummeling the air. Mom, Percy yelled. Sally caught Percy's eyes, managed to choke out one last word, go. Then, with an angry roar, the monster closed his fists around her neck, and she dissolved before Percy's eyes, melting into light, a shimmering golden form, as if she were a holographic projection. A blinding flash and she was simply gone. No. Percy saw the Minotaur bore down on Grover, who lay helpless in the grass. The monster hunched over, snuffling him, as if he were about to lift Grover up and make him dissolve too. Percy stripped off his red rain jacket. Hey, he screamed, waving the jacket, running to one side of the monster. Hey, stupid. Ground beef. Rah. The Minotaur turned toward him, shaking his meaty fists. Percy patted his back to the big pine tree and waved his red jacket in front of the Minotaur. He charged too fast, his arms out to grab him whichever way he tried to dodge. Percy's legs tensed. He couldn't jump sideways, so he leaped straight up, kicking off from the creature's head, using it as a springboard, turning in midair, and landing on his neck. How did I do that? Percy didn't have time to figure it out. A millisecond later, the Minotaur's head slammed into the tree and the impact nearly knocked his teeth out. The Minotaur staggered around, trying to shake him, but he locked his arms around his horns to keep from being thrown. The smell of rotten meat burned his nostrils. The Minotaur shook himself around and bucked like a rodeo bull. Meanwhile, Grover started groaning on the grass. Percy wanted to yell at him to shut up. Food. Grover moaned. The Minotaur wheeled toward him, pawed the ground again, and got ready to charge. In the range, Percy got both hands around one horn and pulled backward with all his might. The Minotaur tensed, gave a surprised grunt, then, snap. The bullman screamed and flung him through the air. He landed flat on his back in the grass. His head smacked against a rock. Percy sat up, his vision was blurry, but he had a horn in his hands, a ragged bone weapon the size of a knife. The Minotaur charged. Without thinking, he rolled to one side and came up kneeling. As the monster barreled past, he tried to drive the broken horn straight into his side, right up under his furry ribcage. But he threw him toward Grover. Percy saw the Minotaur roared and charged toward them. Excuse me, A voice said from behind the Minotaur, and then someone punched him in the face with a strong force, and sent him flying through a series of trees in the forest. Are you alright, Percy? Percy saw it was Naruto, who punched the Minotaur. Naruto, what are you doing here? He asked. I will explain you later, Naruto said. He saw Grover. Take Grover and go. I will handle him. But, go. Percy managed to haul Grover up and stagger down into the valley, toward the lights of the farmhouse. Naruto looked at the Minotaur, who was getting up on his feet. When they got in there, Percy fell to his knees. Looking up, he saw the familiar face of Mr. Brunner, who was giving him a serious look. He also saw a very pretty blonde-haired girl, whose hair looked curled like a princess. In Naruto, monster, fight, Percy said and fell unconscious. What was he talking about? Blonde girl asked. Mr. Brunner said, Annabeth. That was when the ground-shaking impact occurred that rocked the forest. The tremor sent them off their feet to the ground. That can't be good, Annabeth said. That could be the monster's doing. I somehow doubt that, Mr. Brunner thought. Suddenly the Minotaur's body came crashing down in front of them, then began to disintegrate like crumbling sand, blown away in chunks by the wind. Mr. Brunner saw Naruto was clammily coming toward them, with Minotaur's horn in his left hand. He was wearing a gray shirt, black pants, black shoes, and a black jacket with hood. What really caught his eye was his face. Naruto had short fangs in his mouth, and slightly slitted pupils in his eyes. Also he had small purple-colored diamond mark on his forehead. Hello Mr. Brunner, Naruto said. He looked at the blonde girl. And you are? My name is Annabeth Chase. Naruto nodded. Naruto Uchiha. He saw Percy and Grover. They're unconscious, he said. Bring 'em inside, Mr. Brunner said. 0 times skip 0. Good to see you again Mr. Brunner, Naruto commented. You already know my real name, Naruto, Mr. Brunner said. The question is how. Your name is Chiron, Naruto said. Illusion does not work on me. I can easily see your horse half. After that it wasn't difficult to find your true name. So you are from that world, Chiron said. Annabeth gave Chiron a look of confusion while Naruto had a serious look on his face. To know about the Element Nation? He asked with narrowed eyes while Annabeth looked even more confused. I hear things when I got to the annual meets of the gods, Chiron said. Gods. Chiron told Naruto all about Greek gods and their existence. You are in the same boat as Percy. If you are indeed a child of the Big Three, then one of you has to decide the fate of the world at a later time as said in a prophecy of the oracle. Chiron said. I am not interested nor do I want to decide the fate of the world. If what you say is true then, I will leave it to Percy. I see, just know that the prophecy says the time will come when the demigod is 16, so we have time. Nothing is set in stone, Naruto said. And I don't believe in the prophecy. Very well, Chiron said. If I am a kid of the Big Three, whose am I? We have an idea, but we must keep quiet until they claim you. Besides, being one of the Big Three's kids is kind of bad. Chiron stated. Why? Because, they swore an oath after World War II that they would not have kids anymore, Annabeth answered. Whatever, Naruto said. Now I will have a camper show you the cabin for later. Then you come back here. When Percy wakes up I will tell more about this as I don't want to say this twice, Chiron said. Very well, Naruto and he followed him out the door. Annabeth, please continue to watch Percy please, Chiron ordered. Once outside, Naruto raised an eyebrow. This place was big. He looked around to see that the hill with the pine tree was not far from them. This tree has the soul in it, Naruto thought. Then he looked ahead to see a bunch of cabins in a U-shaped arc. Clarice, come here please, Chiron shouted. The girl turned her head and saw Chiron and one of the new guys everyone was talking about. Naruto noticed that she was pretty tall, strong-looking, and probably 2 years older than him. She looked gruff and had the look of a fighter. What? I would like for you to show Naruto here around the cabins for the moment. I will probably have Annabeth show Naruto and Percy around camp later when the latter wakes up. Fine, got to welcome the newbie anyway, Clarice said with an evil smirk. Naruto raised an eyebrow for that. Well, come with me, Clarice called out, already walking away. He followed her all the way to the middle of the arc of cabins. Okay, listen closely because I am only going to say this once. There are 12 cabins in all. Each one represents the Greek god it was made for. Their kids are the one who lives in there. Since you are new and have not been claimed yet, you will go to cabin 11, the Hermes cabin. Naruto nodded. Who is your parent? He asked. The god of war. Claris pointed to a red cabin. Right, now we have the other cabins. We got Demeter, Dionysus, Athena, Apollo, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hera, Zeus, Artemis and Poseidon. She said, pointing to each. He looked at Zeus and Hera's and quirked an eyebrow. They got some pretty fancy cabins for nobody to use. He noticed that a Hades cabin was not there, odd since he was part of the big three. Now, it is not to, officially, welcome you. Claris said, making a lot of people look to them and they grimaced. Claris was breaking in another newbie. Claris quickly reacted out and tried to grab Naruto. She along with everyone else gasped surprise, when Naruto disappeared with a murder of Crow. What? She shouted. Before she could do anything, she felt cold metal against her neck. You are good, but not that good, Naruto said from behind her. He held kunai on her neck. And thanks for Tor. He put kunai back to his pocket. Claris was in deep shock. Who is he? She thought. They arrived in the big house. Chiron saw that Naruto looked bored and Clausia looked a little lost. As I thought, her welcome plan has failed, he thought. You are back, he said. Since Percy won't be fully awake until tomorrow, I would like for you to stay near here. Okay, see you later Chiron, Claris, Naruto said. He disappeared with a flock of crow. Claris shocked when he had disappeared front of her. Who is he? She asked to Chiron. 0 front of Pine Tree 0. Naruto arrived at the pine tree. He looked at the tree with his Sharingan and saw strange energy. Interesting, it is life energy, Naruto thought. He looked around and noticed the energy had surrounded whole camp. And it is protecting the camp. Naruto closed his eyes and touched the tree by his left hand. Suddenly he felt pulling sensation. When he opened his eyes, he was in a large white room and was not alone. A girl stood across from him, staring at him with shock eyes. She had shoulder-length or short, spiky black hair, electric blue eyes and freckles across her nose. She was wearing some punk-style clothes. She is extremely pretty. Who are you? The girl asked. I am Naruto Uchiha, Naruto said. Who are you? Where are we? I am Talia and we are in limbo. I am Talia and we are in limbo. Talia saw the boy front of her. He was tall and handsome. He had pale skin with spicy, midnight black hair, and dark blue eyes. He was wearing a gray shirt, black pants, black shoes, and a black jacket with hood. How did you come here? She asked. I don't know, and you? Naruto asked. It is the longest story. I have time, but first tell me, are you demigod? Talia nodded. Whose kid are you? Naruto asked. Talia scowled a bit and said, Zeus and you. Naruto raised an eyebrow but didn't say much to her scowling. Not a clue. He looked at her and asked, are you ready to tell me your story? Talia nodded. She told him about her journey with Luck, Annabeth. How they were found by a satyr named Grover Underwood who tried to get him to Camp Half-Blood. Together, they traveled to Camp Half-Blood but chased by monsters from the underworld. Once they reached camp, a horde of monsters attacked and she sacrificed her life on Half-Blood Hill to protect Annabeth, Luke, and Grover. To prevent her soul from going to Hades, Zeus turned her into a pine tree. Wow, you are brave, Naruto said. How long have you been here anyway? I think more than 5 years. I can come here. Then I guess I can keep you company now and then. Naruto said with a smile. Next time I will tell you my story, he said. Talia smiled back. Thanks, I would like that. Well, see you next time, Talia, Naruto said and gave her a hug. He backed up from the hug and disappeared from there. See you later Naruto, Talia whispered to herself with a slight blush. 0 back in the normal world 0. Naruto saw it was morning. Didn't think I was in limbo that long, he thought and disappeared. Naruto appeared in the big house. He saw Grover, Annabeth, and Chiron there around a table with another person he had not met yet. Good morning. They turned their heads and saw him. Good morning Naruto, Chiron said, fully turning around. Anyway, I would like you to meet Mr. Naruto looked at the other man who was sitting around the table with a Coke can in his hand. He wore a leopard print shirt and had messy black hair and was a little on the chubby side and as rocking the bearded look. He looked like someone who coached a Pui soccer team. Well, I guess I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. Mr. D said. Nice to meet you, Mr. Wine God, Naruto said. That is correct. Nice to see not all the demigods that first arrive here are idiots, Mr. D said. It is not difficult. I can sense you a god. Because your energy signature is different from others, Naruto said. Energy signature? Mr. D asked. Naruto is from that world, Chiron said. Mr. D surprised at this. You are from Element Nation, he said to Naruto. Well, I can honestly say that I have never been to your world. But I have heard about it from the other gods. What is Element Nation? Annabeth asked. Element Nation is another world, or you could say that, it is another dimension. It is a dangerous place. Naruto is from that world, Chiron said. He told them about ninja, shinobi, chakra and some other detail. Wow, I never know that kind world exist, Grover said and Annabeth nodded. Naruto Uchiha. Are you related to Madara Uchiha? Mr. D asked. Naruto surprised at this. Yes, he is my grandfather, he said. Interesting, Mr. D said. What is interesting, Mr. D? Grover asked. I heard from other gods, Madara was powerful warrior. Alone he can destroy armies of the enemy. Also he was able to control the demon using his eyes, Mr. D said. Control demon using the eyes? Annabeth asked. Mr. D means this. Annabeth looked at Naruto. His normally dark blue eyes were red with 3 black tomo spinning inside them. This is Sharingan, he said and his eyes turned back to normal. So this is Sharingan, Mr. D asked. Naruto nodded. Oh Naruto, I almost forgot. These are yours, Chiron said as he took out 2 black fingerless gloves. Naruto took them and put them on hands. After examining them, he saw Jubi's red eye-like symbol on right glove. He channeled his chakra into it and it started to glow. As the glow faded, Naruto saw his right glove had now taken on the form of a black and red gauntlet that had a small chain linking it to a stinger-like blade on his middle finger. The stinger was about twice as long as the normal length of his fingers, slightly increasing his striking distance. Note. Imagine Suaven Suzumbaki's Shikai. Niece, Naruto said. Mr. D surprised by the amount of power rolling from him. Such power, he thought. I can tell that he is hiding his power. Zero with Percy Zero. Percy groaned as he opened his eyes. He was sitting in a deck chair on a huge porch, gazing across a meadow at green hills in the distance. He smelled strawberries in the air. There was a blanket over his legs, a pillow behind his neck. All that was great, but he had other things on his mind. Where am I? My tongue is dry and nasty and every one of my teeth is hurt. He noticed on the table next to him was a tall drink. It looked like iced apple juice, with a green straw and a paper parasol stuck through a maraschino cherry. He reached for it with shaky hands, and almost dropped it once he had lifted it off the table. Careful, a familiar voice said. He saw Grover was leaning against the porch railing. Under one arm, he cradled a shoebox. He was wearing blue jeans, Converse high tops and a bright orange t-shirt that said Camp Half-Blood. You saved my life, Grover said. Well, the least I could do. I went back to the hill. I thought you might want this. He placed the shoebox in Percy's lap. Inside was a black and white bull's horn, the base jagged from being broken off, the tip splattered with dried blood. It wasn't a nightmare, Percy thought. The Minotaur, he said. Percy, it isn't a good idea. That's what they call him in the Greek myths, isn't it? Percy demanded. The Minotaur, half man, half bull. Grover shifted uncomfortably and asked, You've been out for 2 days. How much do you remember? My mom, is she really? Grover looked down. I'm sorry. He sniffled. I'm a failure. I'm the worst satyr in the world. Percy said, It wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. I was supposed to protect you. Did my mother ask you to protect me? No. But that's my job. I'm a keeper. At least, I was. But why? Percy suddenly felt dizzy, his vision swimming. Don't strain yourself, Grover said. Here. He helped Percy hold the glass and put the straw to his lips. Percy nodded reluctantly and began to sip of the drink. He recoiled at the taste. It was his mom's homemade blue chocolate chip cookies, turned to liquid form. He didn't realize that he had kept drinking it until it was gone. He looked into the glass sure that he had just had a warm drink to see that the ice cubes hadn't even melted. How do you feel, Percy? Grover asked. Percy said, like I could throw Nancy Bobofit 100 yards. That's good, Grover said. That's good. I don't think you could risk drinking any more of that stuff. What do you mean? Percy asked. Grover took the empty glass from Percy and set it back on the table. Come on. Chiron and Mr. D are waiting. Percy's legs felt wobbly, trying to walk that far. Grover had offered to hold the Minotaur horn he was holding, but he refused. As they came around the opposite end of the house, Percy caught his breath. He thought, they must have been on the north shore of Long Island, because on this side of the house, the valley marched all the way up to the water, which glittered about a mile in the distance. Between here and there, he simply couldn't process everything he was seeing. The landscape dotted with buildings that looked like ancient Greek architecture, an open-air pavilion, an amphitheater, a circular arena, except that they all looked brand new, their white marble columns sparkling in the sun. In a nearby sand pit, a dozen high school-age kids and satyrs played volleyball. Canoes glided across a small lake. Kids in bright orange t-shirts like Grover's were chasing each other around a cluster of cabins nestled in the woods. Some shot targets at an archery range. Others rode horses down a wooded trail, and some of their horses had wings. Percy saw down at the end of the porch, two men sat across from each other at a card table. The blonde-haired girl who'd spoon-fed him popcorn-flavored pudding was leaning on the porch rail next to them. Finally there was Naruto, who was playing a card game with both men. That's Mr. D, Grover murmured to Percy. He's the camp director. Be polite. The girl, that's Annabeth Chase. She's just a camper, but she's been here longer than just about anybody. And you already know Chiron. He pointed at the guy whose back was to him. First, Percy realized he was sitting in the wheelchair. Then he recognized the tweed jacket, the thinning brown hair, the scraggly beard. Mr. Brunner, he cried. Ah, good, Percy, Mr. Brunner said. Now we have 4 for Pinochle. He offered Percy a chair to the right of Mr. D, who looked at him with bloodshot eyes and heaved a great sigh. Oh, I suppose I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. There. Now, don't expect me to be glad to see you, Mr. D said. Ah, thanks. Percy scooted a little farther away from him because, if there was one thing he had learned from living with Gape, it was how to tell when an adult has hit the happy juice. If Mr. D was a stranger to alcohol, he was a satyr. Annabeth, Chiron called to the blonde girl. She came forward and Mr. Brunner introduced him. This young lady nursed you back to health, Percy. Annabeth, my dear, why don't you go check Percy's bunk? We'll be putting him in cabin 11 with Naruto for now. Annabeth said, sure, Chiron. Percy looked at her. She was probably his age, maybe a couple of inches taller, and a whole lot more athletic looking. With her deep tan and her curly blonde hair, she was almost exactly what he thought a stereotypical California girl would look like, except her eyes ruined the image. They were startling gray, like storm clouds, pretty, but intimidating, too, as if she were analyzing the best way to take him down in a fight. Annabeth glanced at the Minotaur horn in Percy's hands, then back at him. Percy imagined she was going to say, you fought with a Minotaur. Or, wow, you're so awesome. Or something like that. Instead she said, you drool when you sleep. Percy confused at first until he heard Naruto. I bet you thought she was going to say that you were awesome of something that, he said. Percy asked, wait, what about you? What happened with that? I killed it. For now, Naruto said. Thank you, Percy said. You work here, Mr. Brunner. Not Mr. Brunner, the Chiron or Mr. Brunner said. I'm afraid that was a pseudonym. You may call me Chiron. Okay. Totally confused, Percy looked at the director. And Mr. D. Does that stand for something? Idiot, Naruto thought. Mr. D stopped shuffling the cards. He looked Percy like he did just belched loudly. Young man, names are powerful things. You don't just go around using them for no reason. Oh, right, sorry. I must say, Percy, Chiron Brunner broke in, I'm glad to see you alive. It's been a long time since I've made a house call to a potential camper. I'd hate to think I've wasted my time. House call. My year at Yancey Academy, to instruct you. We have satyrs at most schools, of course, keeping a lookout. But Grover alerted me as soon as he met you and Naruto. He sensed both of you were something special, so I decided to come upstate. I convinced the other Latin teacher to take a leave of absence. Percy tried to remember the beginning of the school year. It seemed like so long ago, but he did have a fuzzy memory of there being another Latin teacher my first week at Yancey. Then, without explanation, he had disappeared and Mr. Brunner had taken the class. You came to Yancey just to teach me and Naruto? Percy asked. Chiron nodded. Honestly, I wasn't sure about you at first. We contacted your mother, let her know we were keeping an eye on you if you were ready for Camp Half-Blood. But you still had so much to learn. Nevertheless, you made it here alive, and that's always the first test. Well, I had help from Naruto. Percy replied. We know, and I am glad the both of you made it in pieces, Chiron said. Naruto, Mr. D said, your turn. Naruto nodded. You do know how to play pinochle. Mr. D eyed Percy suspiciously. I'm afraid not, Percy said. I'm afraid not, sir. Sir, Percy repeated. He liked the camp director less and less. Mr. D said, then tells me, how did he know? He pointed at Naruto. I don't know, Percy said. Well, Mr. D told Percy, it is, along with gladiator fighting and Pac-Man, one of the greatest games ever invented by humans. I would expect all civilized young men to know the rules. I'm sure the boy can learn, Chiron said. Please, Percy said, what is this place? What am I doing here? Mr. Brune, Chiron, why would you go to Yancey Academy just to teach me? Mr. D snorted. I asked the same question. The camp director dealt the cards. Chiron smiled at Percy sympathetically. Percy, he said, did your mother tell you nothing? She said. Percy remembered her sad eyes, looking out over the sea. She told me she was afraid to send me here, even though my father had wanted her to. She said that once I was here, I probably couldn't leave. She wanted to keep me close to her. Typical, Mr. D said. That's how they usually get killed. Young man, are you bidding or not? What? Percy asked. Mr. D explained him, impatiently, how you bid in pinochle, and so he did. I'm afraid there's too much to tell, Chiron said. I'm afraid our usual orientation film won't be enough. Orientation film? Percy asked and then rounded on Naruto. And you don't seem to be surprised by this stuff at all. Naruto shrugged and said, well, since I woke up earlier, I was told this already and I told them about the other world and they seemed to understand. Percy just blinked at him owlishly. No, Chiron decided. Well, Percy, you know your friend Grover is a satyr. You know, he pointed to the horn in the shoe box, that you fought with the Minotaur. No small feat, either, lad. What you may not know is that great powers are at work in your life. Gods, the forces you call the Greek gods, are very much alive. Percy stared at the others around the table. He waited for somebody to yell, not. But all he got was Mr. D yelling, oh, a royal marriage. Trick, trick. He cackled as he tallied up his points. Mr. D, Grover asked timidly, if you're not going to eat it, could I have your Diet Coke can? Oh, all right. Grover bit a huge shard out of the empty aluminum can and chewed it mournfully. Wait, Percy said to Chiron. You're telling me there's such a thing as God? Well, now, Chiron said. God. Capital G, God. That's a different matter altogether. We will not deal with the metaphysical. Metaphysical. But you were just talking about gods, plural, as in, great beings that control the forces of nature and human endeavors, the immortal gods of Olympus. That's a smaller matter. Smaller. Yes, quite. The gods we discussed in Latin class. Zeus, Percy said. Hera, Apollo, you mean them. There it was again, distant thunder on a cloudless day. Young man, said Mr. D, I would really be less casual about throwing those names around, if I were you. But they're stories, Percy said. They're myths, to explain lightning and the seasons and stuff. They're what people believed before there was science. Science, Mr. D scoffed. And tell me, Perseus Jackson, Percy flinched when he said his real name, which he never told anybody, what will people think of your science 2,000 years from now? Mr. D continued. They will call it primitive mambo jumbo. That's what. Oh, I love mortals, they have absolutely no sense of perspective. They think they've come so far. And have them, Chiron. Look at this boy and tell me. Percy raised a brow at the camp director the way he called them mortals. It was like, he wasn't. He could see why Grover was keeping his mouth shut and his eyes on his cards. Percy, Chiron said, you may choose to believe or not, but the fact is that immortal means immortal. Can you imagine that for a moment, never dying, never fading, existing, just as you are, for all time? Lonely, Naruto muttered, and Percy heard him. You mean, whether people believed in you or not, Percy said. Exactly, Chiron agreed. If you were a god, how would you like being called a myth, an old story to explain lightning? What if I told you, Perseus Jackson, that someday people would call you a myth, just created to explain how little boys can get over losing their mothers? Percy said, I wouldn't like it. But I don't believe in gods. Oh, you'd better, Mr. D murmured. Before one of them incinerate you. Grover said, please, sir. He's just lost his mother. He's in shock. A lucky thing, too, Mr. D grumbled, playing a card. Bad enough I'm confined to this miserable job, working with boys who don't even believe. He waved his hand and a goblet appeared on the table, as if the sunlight had bent, momentarily, and woven the air into glass. The goblet filled itself with red wine. Percy's jaw dropped, but Chiron hardly looked up. Mr. D, he warned, your restrictions. Mr. D looked at the wine and feigned surprise. Dear me. He looked at the sky and yelled, old habits. Sorry. More thunder. He waved his hand again, and the wineglass changed into a fresh can of Diet Coke. He sighed unhappily, popped the top of the soda, and went back to his card game. Chiron winked at Percy. Mr. D offended his father a while back, took a fancy to a wood nymph that had been declared off limits. A wood nymph, Percy repeated, who still staring at the Diet Coke can like it was from outer space. Yes, Mr. D confessed. Father loves to punish me. The first time, prohibition. Ghastly. Absolutely horrid 10 years. The second time, well, she really was pretty, and I couldn't stay away. The second time, he sent me here. Half-Blood Hill. Summer camp for brats like you. Be a better influence, he told me. Work with youths and not tearing them down. Ha. Absolutely unfair. He sounded about 6 years old, like a pouting little kid. And, Percy stammered, your father is. Immortals, Chiron, Mr. D said. I thought you taught this boy the basics. My father is Zeus, of course. Percy ran through D names from Greek mythology, wine, the skin of a tiger. The satyrs that all seemed to work here. The way Grover cringed, as if Mr. D were his master. You're Dionysus, Percy said. The god of wine. Mr. D rolled his eyes. What do they say, these days, Grover? Do the children say, well, duh. Why yes, Mr. D. Then, well, duh. Percy Jackson. Did you think I was Aphrodite, perhaps? You're a god. Yes, child. A god, you. I think that we all get that fact now. Naruto said, not looking up from his cards. Percy didn't hear him. Are you sure that you're a god? You don't look like one. He said. Mr. D turned to look at Percy straight on, and he saw a kind of purplish fire in his eyes, a hint that this whiny, plump little man was only showing him the tiniest bit of his true nature. He saw visions of grapevines choking unbelievers to death, drunken warriors insane with battle lust, sailors screaming as their hands turned into flippers, their faces elongating into dolphin snouts. Would you like to test me, child? Mr. D said quietly. No, sir, Percy said. The fire died a little. Mr. D turned back to his card game. I believe I win. Not quite, Mr. D, Chiron said. He set down a straight, tallied the points, and said, the game goes to me. Actually, Chiron, Naruto said and set his hand down to show a double roundabout, I win. He said leaning back. Oh, I think I'm beginning to like this boy Chiron. Mr. D said with a smirk of his own. His statement drew wide eyes from Grover and Chiron. He got up, and Grover rose, too. I'm tired, Mr. D said. I believe I'll take a nap before the sing-along tonight. But first, Grover, we need to talk, again, about your less-than-perfect performance on this assignment. Grover's face beaded with sweat. Why yes, sir. Mr. D turned to me. Cabin 11, Percy Jackson. And mind your manners. Take Naruto with you since he will be going as well. He swept into the farmhouse. Grover follows miserably. Will Grover be okay? Percy asked Chiron. Chiron nodded, though he looked a bit troubled. Old Dionysus isn't really mad. He just hates his job. He's been, grounded, I guess you would say, and he can't stand waiting another century before he's allowed to go back to Olympus. Mount Olympus, Percy said. You're telling me there really is a palace there? Well now, there's Mount Olympus in Greece. And then there's the home of the gods, the convergence point of their powers, which did indeed used to be on Mount Olympus. It's still called Mount Olympus, out of respect to the old ways, but the palace moves, Percy, just as the gods do. You mean the Greek gods are here? Like, in America? Well, certainly. The gods move with the heart of the West. The what? Percy, Naruto spoke. The West means where the major power is in the world. You see, it has moved from Greece, which was at one point of power, then moved to Rome, to Germany, to France, to Spain, for a while. Now America is the great power of the West. And Sir Olympus is here. It was all too much for Percy. Who are you, Chiron? Who am I? He asked. Chiron smiled. He shifted his weight as if he were going to get up out of his wheelchair. But it is impossible. He is paralyzed from the waist down, Percy thought. Who are you? Chiron mused. Well, that's the question we all want answered, isn't it? But for now, we should get you a bunk in cabin 11. There will be new friends to meet. And plenty of time for lessons tomorrow. Besides, there will be smokes at the campfire tonight, and I simply adore chocolate. And then he did rise from his wheelchair. But there was something odd about the way he did it. His blanket fell away from his legs, but the legs didn't move. His waist kept getting longer, rising above his belt. At first, I thought he was wearing very long, white velvet underwear, but as he kept rising out of the chair, taller than any man, I realized that the velvet underwear wasn't underwear. It was the front of an animal, muscle and sinew under coarse white fur. And the wheelchair wasn't a chair. It was a container, an enormous box on wheels, and it must have been magic, because there's no way it would have held all of him. A leg came out, long and knock-kneed, with a huge polished hoof. Then another front leg, then hindquarters, and then the box was empty, nothing but a metal as hell with a couple of fake human legs attached. Percy stared at the horse that had just sprung from the wheelchair, a huge white stallion. But where its neck should be was the upper body of their Latin teacher, smoothly grafted to the horse's trunk. What a relief, the centaur said. I'd been cooped up in there so long, my fetlocks had fallen asleep. Now, come, Percy Jackson. Let's meet the other campers. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.